Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my fine friends. Welcome to the 7th episode of the 14th season of the Tom Petty Project podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brown, and this is the only weekly podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalogue, song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. So first up, this will be my last weekly update on Jake Thistle's progress on American Idol, as sadly, he was eliminated from the competition during the public vote this past week, and we found that out tonight as I'm writing and recording this. I'm hoping to chat to Jake once his new album is coming up for release, so I'll definitely be asking him about, his Idol experience, but I wanted to offer a few thoughts on this. So, again, tonight was the night of the broadcast, and Jake posted the following to his Facebook page. What a ride. Had such an incredible experience on American Idol, meeting so many amazing folks and learning a ton. Super grateful for the opportunity to share my music with such a large audience, and it was an honor to be a part of a season with such a special group. I've always considered myself more of a songwriter than a singer, so I'm just so happy to have gotten to hang around with everyone as long as I was able to. See you guys on the road soon. There's plenty more to come. And what I love about this is that it highlights what us longtime fans have always known and admired, among many other things, about Jake. This is a calm, measured response to not reaching the top 12. He said absolutely nothing negative and focused on the things that matter to him going in throughout his time on the show and as he leaves. So networking, exposure, and experience. It takes so much more than pure talent, which he has in truckloads, to make it in the music industry, and Jake clearly viewed this as a great opportunity to test himself in a different environment and soak up all that knowledge and all that learning. If you pay attention to this guy, he is a sponge. He's always had that maturity about what he's doing, knows what he needs to learn or improve, and works diligently and with great focus towards whatever target he has. So I don't think winning American Idol was ever necessarily the primary goal. It would have been nice. It would have been a nice bonus, but I would be amazed if Jake had ever considered it as the primary objective at this stage in his career. For one thing, Jake's already played more live gigs than most of his contemporaries on that show put together, and he's working on his second label release on top of the self-release debut that he put out, back in, 2021? Yeah, right around the time I started this podcast, so I think it was 2021. He's been doing the job for years, so he didn't need that particular door to be opened. And I said during the Hawaii week performances that it was such a smart move for him to play one of his original songs. I suspect he probably knew he wasn't necessarily exactly what the show was looking for narratively, so getting his own song in front of all those industry folks and the public was an incredibly savvy move. At no point did he try to pander to what he thought might garner votes. He played songs that mattered to him and suited him. That's why each and every performance came across as honest and authentic, because they were. It was a real trip seeing the guy up there on a major network TV show for a few weeks, and I know that it won't have changed him in any negative way at all. So now it's back to what he does best, writing and playing fantastic songs. And I've said this before, I'd never seen an episode of American Idol before this season, and I can't honestly say that I'll be watching the rest of this season, or that I'm inclined to tune in for future seasons, but it's definitely softened my, I would say, probably snobbish attitude towards the show too. I think, like a lot of people, I've always assumed that it's a shortcut for, somewhat talented pop stars and singers and starlets to fast-track their way to a career that they, in quotes, haven't earned yet. But knowing Jake, a little, and having seen how hard he's worked, it shows that this isn't exclusively the case. I'm sure there are plenty of the folks competing on this season still who are equally hardworking, honest musicians, and it's worth remembering that anyone would be a fool to turn down the opportunity to meet other rising talent, meet people in the industry, and practice your craft on a much larger stage than you've probably ever been on before. So anyone going on there who is writing and performing their own material and using this as an opportunity to be seen, I will only applaud and wish well from now on. I mean, wouldn't we much rather have kids trying to make it in music than trying to focus on, getting famous on TikTok or Instagram? Okay. That's enough about American Idol, and hopefully I'll be chatting to Jake sooner rather than later. Last week, we discussed Turn This Car Around, and the poll came back, kind of where I thought it would. 12% of you gave it a top tier 10 out of 10, with the 84% majority of you going with a 7 to 9 out of 10, and the remaining 4% with a 6 or below. Over on Instagram, Lisa Kelly Pennington commented, I like this one, but ominous is a good word. I have no good theories, though, as to what it's about. I'm curious about the trivia question. I just assumed it was another language thing, and each word was used in a different region. I appreciate the Jedi mind trick, and it worked. 4 and 2. Well, there we go, Lisa. You'll find out, obviously, about the petty trivia later in the show. And I figured we could tempt the fates and see if we could get you back on track. So I'm glad that we did. As the French say, et voila. At Couples Rob wrote, I read a theory on the internet about this song being about heroin addicts. Turn this car around like they're going back to their dealer. King and Queen are loaded, drifting off to sleep. Rockets in the tail lights. Their dealer pulling away, etc. Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting take on it. I'd be surprised if that was the case, obviously. But hey, as I've said in many episodes, how we interpret these songs is always valid in my mind. The interpretation of art is down to the person consuming it, not the artist, which is a curious state of affairs when you think about it. So unless it's a song like Hurricane by Dylan or Biko by Peter Gabriel, I'm 100% in favour of constructing our own stories and narratives around songs like last week's. Over on Facebook, the brilliant Sam Krishnan says, top 3 greatest Mike Campbell solos ever in my books. And hey, look, Sam, I'm not going to argue with that. I think I mentioned on a recent episode that if I submit a Last DJ list to Tom Petty Radio, I think it would be themed around this very topic, and I'm absolutely definitely going to do a special episode in the future talking about Mike's solos. I think that could actually be a really good panel discussion, bringing a couple of previous guests who were also guitar players. I can only imagine how cool it would be, for example, to have Shine and Ivan Anderson and maybe Tim Bullman on the same call talking about guitar. That would be super cool. My pal Steve Ursel commented, I have developed a strong liking for this song. I can't tell you exactly what it's about literally, but it does convey a certain sense of anxiety and an urgency to turn away from the current path to seek out familiar comforts, which I'm sure is a theme many people can easily relate to. I'll give this one a 9. And I have to tell you that it continues to be one of the greatest joys of this podcast that you're listening to much of Tom's work for the first time as we go along with the pod, Steve. It was great to have you on the show a few weeks back and chat about music in general and about your life. And as someone with such fantastic taste, I'm just thrilled that you're finding so many songs in Tom's body of work that you enjoy. Rich Gibson writes, great track, lots of dynamics and explosive middle section. Not quite at the very top table, but very good. Mike's solo is very tasteful and George-esque. Here's a thought. With only 3 musicians on the album, and some, like Tom, doing a double shift, it was a lot easier to have it stripped back without upsetting people who were not used on a track. So Tom can really lean into the sparseness on a number of songs. Great analysis, as usual, Kev. Well, thanks as always, Rich. And yeah, that's a really cool point, man. I think that combination of, no co-written songs plus, as you say, a really minimal set of musicians, only 3 musicians, you really can dial into exactly what the core of each song is and keep things as spare and as economical as possible. I do think the Heartbreakers had that uncanny ability to also serve the song exquisitely, but I think your point is an interesting one nonetheless. And look, if I can ever get a hold of Jeff Lynne, I'll be sure to ask him. Chris Nestoridis, who I think maybe commenting for the first time, says simply, if any song has a vibe, it's so cool. I'm going back. And I'd commented back to Chris that Vibe could easily have been the title of this album. As Mojo captures the spirit of that record, Vibe encapsulates a lot of why Highway Companion lands so perfectly for so many of us. To finish up our social media, Brett Lowe says, took me forever, but I'm finally caught up on the podcast and even had to wait to listen to this release. What a great song on an album full of great songs. Happy to actively finish this journey with you all. And as always, I'm massively humbled and incredibly grateful for any of you spending time listening to the show. Brett, if you've also been listening to the guest episodes, that's 168 hours of me waffling on about Tom that you've listened to. So a very sincere thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts from your out on the socials. Welcome aboard, mate. Right, on to today's show, which is a special episode as we take a break at the halfway point of Highway Companion. This week, we're revisiting an old song. It's time to rewind all the way back to 1976 and have another listen to anything that's rock and roll. So I've been considering doing this one for a while now, and I thought that this would probably be as good a time as any to do it. As I approach the 300 episode mark of the show, which would happen somewhere around August, which would also mark my 5-year anniversary, I've been thinking about my journey with this catalogue and how my relationship with Tom's music has changed over the last few years. Obviously, I dived into the catalogue long before I started the show, but I wasn't as deep into my fandom as I am now. In that time, I've had dozens of conversations with fans, musicians, writers, and, people connected with Tom along the way, as I say at the top. And my appreciation for Tom and the rest of the band has grown exponentially, as you might expect. Back on September 15th, 2021, I published my episode covering anything that's rock and roll. I gave the song a 5 out of 10. Now, hold on. That's why I'm doing this episode. Just give me a chance to explain. First, though, the backlash. Back then, I had barely any followers on social media, as you would expect, and I wasn't bothered about that. And I'd only been a member of the Tom Petty Nation for a few months, so I wasn't completely clued into how actively protective the Pettyhead community was. I soon learned. On September 21st, I innocently published a little graphic into the TPN with the scores for the first 5 songs on side A. 5 out of 10 for Rockin' Around With You, 10 for Breakdown, 6 for Hometown Blues, 8 for The Wild One Forever, and the 5 out of 10 that I'll be talking about today. You can imagine the reaction and the response. And I would say that most people were very measured in telling me I was dead wrong about this song. A few people appreciated that this was just my opinion and I wasn't dragging any of the songs, and a few people wished me luck with the podcast, but a few people did stick the boot in, and I did feel slightly chastened, and I haven't posted any of my entire album ratings, well, not on Tom Petty Nation since. I probably should do that at some point and see if I can get people back on board, but I remember at the time I couldn't understand why people were so shocked. To my mind, the song was, and in fairness still is, a pretty basic 4-chord rock and roll song. Tom's written dozens of more lyrically intricate or emotionally charged or thematically grander songs, so how could I put this up at the same level as Money Becomes King or even American Girl? So I wanted to start this episode with a little self-indulgence, if you'll humour me and then forgive me. When I started this podcast, as I say, I wasn't a member of the Tom Petty Nation, and I didn't have any friends who were huge Tom Petty fans, so I didn't have that same attachment to the music that, lifelong fans would have, and I didn't really get how much love there was for Tom's music. I mean, I loved it. I loved the music, but it wasn't deep inside my marrow yet. So as I approached the songs on the first couple or 3 records, I was really trying to be, somewhat clinical. I was really being as objective as possible. And if you remember, anybody who listened to the whole podcast, those first, 2, 3 seasons, I really was just sort of describing what I was hearing and describing what each instrument was doing and going through sort of almost bar by bar in some cases, which, I think I do that partially. But I wasn't really talking about what the songs meant to me. I wasn't talking about my interpretation of the songs, what they evoke in my mind. And some songs were special right at the gate. I've definitely talked about Southern Accents and Crawling Back to You and how those songs instantly hit me like a freight train. But it's really interesting to me now that as you sink deeper and deeper into fandom, and fandom specifically, as is separate from the music, I've gained a much deeper knowledge of and appreciation for the majority of Tom's catalogue. It definitely changes how I think about those earlier works. You can see little glimmers of future songs in those foundational early tracks, and you appreciate the context in which they were written differently when you have the whole story. So before starting the podcast, I hadn't read Warren Zane's biography. Crazy, I know, but I didn't feel that the story of Petty the Man was important if I was only analysing and talking about the music, which was my original intent. But now, having read Zane's and spending so much time with Paul Zolo's book, and then, of course, reading John Scott's brilliant memoir, reading a lot of other people's books about Tom's music and how they connect to it, all this context really does reshape how you view and listen to every song. It's all tied into the development of this man, or these men as well as musicians. You can't make a hard divide between the artist and the art in cases like Petty, I don't think. Some songs are closer to the centre of him than others, but every single one reveals a tiny sliver about his personality, his sense of humour, his worries, his influences. So as much as anything else, I wanted to reflect on my own development as a music critic, if you'll allow me so grand a title. So in the episode back in 2021, this is how I wrapped up the song and justified my rating. It's now time to score this one. I think that honestly, live it's a much better song, and I'd love to have seen the band open with this in the late 70s, especially at that Boston gig. The album version cuts pretty short, and without any Benmont in the mix, I do have to dock it a couple of marks I might otherwise have given it, as I think that would have stepped it up a couple of notches. So anything that's rock and roll, like the album opener, gets a solid 5 out of 10 from me. A perfectly serviceable foot tapper, but not the most interesting song on the album overall. And it's really interesting to look back at what you thought 5 years ago about any subject. If any of you are diarists, I'm sure if you ever go back and look at your old diaries, you think, man, I sure was different back then. So what do I agree with in that summary, and what would I now change? Okay, well, first of all, I would stand by the statement that the live versions of the song are my favourites because a rock and roll song, and it's really amped up by the inclusion of Benmont on organ and piano, especially on piano. It's great timing also to talk about that performance in Boston, as we're getting that show on vinyl for Record Store Day this month. Re-listening to that recording too is super interesting because it's so raw. Stan Lynch really speeds up on the drums. It starts out around, I think, 131 BPM and ends up around 138. That's a pretty significant speed up, and you can hear it clearly too. I'd also strongly stand by my comment that it's not the most interesting song on the album, not musically. And what I mean by that is it doesn't really have any hidden corners or unexpected twists or turns. It does exactly what it says on the tin. But you don't open a tin of beans and expect lobster thermidor. So you shouldn't put anything that's rock and roll onto your turntable and expect Beethoven. As I said earlier, it's a simple 4-chord rock and roll song with a riff that's been used on a million great rock and roll songs. But evaluating it only in those terms really misses the point. On my show, The Ultimate Catalog Clash, that I co-host with my pal Corey, we assign scores at a 10 for music, 10 for lyrics, and 5 for production for each song on one side of a record every episode. This is done as objectively as we can, but we also then reserve the right to assign a different metric, an unofficial, sort of informal metric, dubbed the Haskin scale, in honor of our pal and regular season-end guest, Scott Haskin, which is just, out of 10, how much do you like this song? Regardless of whether the music's great, the lyrics great, or the production's great, how much do you like the song? So this brings me to the crucial point of contention I have with my own initial rating. I called anything that's rock and roll a perfectly serviceable foot tapper. Now, serviceable is certainly not the word I would use now. Does this fall into the brilliant little song category that Ivan Anderson established for me? Absolutely. Little songs are often the greatest songs, and I've talked lots on this show about how much I admire Tom's economy in his songwriting, and there's tremendous economy in this track. It's 2 minutes and 23 seconds of pure, unadulterated youthful exuberance and a statement of rebellious intent. Some friends of mine and me stayed up all through the night, rocking pretty steady till the sky went light, and didn't go to bed, didn't go to work. I picked up the telephone, told the boss he was a jerk. I mean, come on. You don't find better rock and roll lyrics than those. They come from a guy who's done the time, worked the crummy jobs, worked the crummy bars, playing to uninterested punters who just want to see the strippers. He's lived this life, and the way he's singing about it, it's real. Sure, it's also a pastiche at the same time, but it's one rooted in actual reality for him. It's Chuck Berry with more distortion. It's Buddy Holly with even more swagger. It's a song that Elvis couldn't have ever sung because he was too pretty. But a 26-year-old Tom Petty, with a chip on his shoulder right next to that guitar strap, challenging the audience and jack-in-a-boxing his way around the stage, he can sing it, and it just works, doesn't it? Mike Campbell's simple rockabilly solo just steps up all that pent-up energy and ambition and fires it all upwards into the night sky, letting it rain down on you sonically. It's all about the attitude and all about the hedonistic intent. Okay, folks, it's time for some petty trivia. Your question from last week was this: what is the difference between a highway and a freeway? Is it A, highways are always longer than freeways? B, freeways allow direct access from roads and driveways? C, freeways have no intersections and only ramp access while highways can have intersections? Or D, there is no difference? Okay, so there is a little bit of ambiguity on this, but generally, the difference is highways are a broad category of major roads and can include intersections, traffic lights, and even direct access from driveways or side streets. Freeways, on the other hand, are designed for uninterrupted traffic flow, with entry and exits only via ramps and no at-grade crossings. The difference is that a freeway has controlled access only, while a highway may have intersections and direct access points. So your answer was C. Freeways have no intersections and only ramp access, while highways can have intersections. Your question for this week is this. We're talking about low scores this week. I've given 3 scores of 4 out of 10 on the podcast so far, but which of the following was not one of the 3? Is it A, Zombie Zoo, B, Restless, C, Mary's New Car, or D, Let Me Up, I've Had Enough? Okay, back to the song. I still think I can mount all the arguments for why I didn't rate anything that's rock and roll highly in season 1, or numerically highly. You know, I was still feeling my way into the podcast. I definitely wasn't as huge a fan of Tom as a person, and didn't have nearly as much of the background and, you know, the history of the band and where they came from, etc. So, you know, I was just looking structurally, melodically, lyrically, in a comparative way, and I came out with a 5 out of 10. It was a bit of a mad decision. This is music. You have to put aside the technical aspects and ask yourself a simple question. How does it make me feel? That almost always trumps complexity, inventiveness, originality, or virtuosity. And the example I always like to give is Louie Louie by the Kingsmen. Badly performed, badly recorded, and yet one of the best rock and roll covers of all time. As Todd Snyder says in the brilliant Ballad of the Kingsmen,
I don't know the words to that song, Louie Louie, and I'm pretty sure the singer for the Kingsmen didn't know him either. If he did know him, he didn't get him right on the record, cause on the record they sound jumbled in his jaw. Says, me think of me girl oh so constantly, I may
But man, if you like rock and roll, that song moves your feet and it moves your heart. Anything that's rock and roll has that same impact. Its simplicity is actually its strength. Its unapologetic directness lends it its impact. It's probably the most egregious omission from the Greatest Hits compilation, and I think it would have made a great opener for the 40th anniversary tour, even though you can see why they chose the opening track from the debut record. And it's kind of amazing that it was never played live once after 1987. As we're in the anniversary year for the debut album, I think I'll be spending a little time looking back at it and maybe recording a few more revisit episodes, whether that's to reevaluate my score or just to revisit and talk a little bit more about some of these songs that the last time I reviewed was, almost 5 years ago. I definitely have to re-record the Lunar episode, and I've talked about this before because I was absolutely hammered when I did that one, much to my professional shame, even though I'm an amateur podcaster. I'm also thinking of a couple of ways we could celebrate the debut's November 9th release, and I'll keep you posted on that. I'm also starting to close in, as I said, on my 300th episode, and I was thinking about possibly doing a special episode for that, maybe a live stream AMA or Ask Me Anything, or maybe a panel discussion around a specific topic like Mike Campbell's solos. I'd mentioned that earlier. That would be a good one, or whatever else. I mean, maybe I'll put a poll up or a post up to see what you guys, you're my listeners, I'll see what you would like for that landmark episode. And if you guys have a great suggestion, a great idea, maybe that's what I can do. Okay, Pettyheads, that's it for this week. I hope me strolling down my own memory lane was okay. I still can't find myself putting anything that's rock and roll at the absolute tip-top table of all Tom's songs. But purely on emotion and spirit and attitude and swagger and, all those good things that rock and roll brings us, I am re-rating this one and giving it the solidest possible 9 out of 10. Let the debate continue. The Tom Petty Project is a proud member of the Boneless Podcasting Network, which is a loose collective of podcasting friends and acquaintances brought together and championed by the inimitable Chaz Charles. Go check out the roster by clicking on the link in the episode notes. You can also check out My The Podcast, Seaside Pod Review, a Queen podcast that I co-host with my very, very best pal, Randy Woods, who performs all the music in this show. You can also check out the Ultimate Catalog Clash that I co-host with my other great pal, Corey Morissette. We just finished this week Side B of Blondie's Parallel Lines. So we only have one album left in Season 8 before we'll be moving on and finding out what artists we're going to be covering in Season 9. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at The Tom Petty Project and on Blue Sky at Tom Petty Project. Go follow, like, subscribe as applicable, and again, please leave a review or a rating if you haven't done that already. Keep talking to me on social media, and I will keep reading out as many of your comments as fit on the show. As your weekly reminder, the Tom Petty Project is not affiliated with the Tom Petty Estate in any way, and when you're looking for Tom's music, please visit official streaming platforms, or better yet, go to a local independent record seller who needs your support and grab some actual physical media. If you're looking for official merchandise, go to store.tompetty.com, and if you're looking for merch for this show, please go to store.tompettyproject.com. Don't forget to check out the Tom Petty Nation and Tom Petty Fans Forever groups on Facebook, and make sure you check out Tom Petty Radio on Channel 31 on Sirius XM. Until we meet again next week, keep listening to and sharing Tom's music. Try to be kind. Try to say I love you to someone at least once a day. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll be back with you next week to get back to Highway Companion. It'll be a big weekend. Bye-bye.